Let me take a moment to go through and clearly explain everything that has happened over the last couple of days because this situation is highly unusual in the context of international relations, and many major American news outlets seem to be either choosing not to highlight it fully or presenting it in a way that reduces its true importance. Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has taken a firm and decisive position by rejecting every single trade demand that Donald Trump placed forward. Not one of those demands was accepted. By taking this consistent and unyielding stance, he has effectively set in motion a situation that could potentially lead to serious strain on the longstanding $1.6 trillion economic relationship between the United States and Canada. That number, $1.6 trillion, represents the full annual exchange of goods and services between the two neighboring countries. At this moment, that entire connection is facing real uncertainty and pressure. And what makes this moment particularly significant is that this is not a minor disagreement or a routine policy difference. This is not about small adjustments to tariffs or limited negotiations over a few products. Instead, what we are seeing is tension within one of the most deeply connected trading relationships anywhere in the world. The United States and Canada share the longest undefended border on the planet, and over many decades, their economies have become tightly linked. Supply chains regularly cross that border multiple times during the production of everyday goods. Despite this deep integration, the current situation is placing that entire system under stress. Another important point is that Carney is not rejecting these demands from a weak position. He is doing so from a place of calculated strength that may not be fully recognized. The data and overall strategy support the approach he has taken. To better understand this, it is helpful to look at how events developed leading up to this point. About 3 weeks ago, Trump entered discussions with a detailed list of conditions tied to the review of the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which is scheduled for review in July. These conditions were not minor or symbolic. They were significant proposals aimed at reshaping key parts of the Canadian economy. The demands included several major changes. First, there was a request for full and unrestricted American access to Canada's dairy sector, which currently operates under a supply management system designed to balance production and pricing. Second, there was a demand to remove Canada's digital services tax and eliminate certain protections related to Canadian content on streaming platforms. Third, there was a push to remove provincial restrictions on alcohol sales, allowing American products to enter Canadian markets without barriers. Fourth, there was a proposal to change government procurement rules so American companies could compete for contracts that have traditionally been focused on domestic businesses. Fifth, there was a demand for a guaranteed energy supply agreement that would require Canada to consistently export oil, natural gas, and electricity to the United States, regardless of domestic needs or pricing conditions. These were broad and impactful demands affecting multiple sectors of the Canadian economy. Carney's response to all of them was clear and direct: no across the board, without entering into negotiations for compromise. It is important to understand that this decision is not based on inexperience. Carney previously served as the governor of the Bank of Canada and later as the governor of the Bank of England, managing financial systems at a very high level. Because of this background, he understands negotiation dynamics, leverage, and calculated risk. He appears to recognize that Trump may be pushing his position further than the situation supports. One key factor here is that Canada's economic position is different from what is sometimes assumed. Over the past 18 months, while public attention was focused on tariff discussions, efforts were quietly underway to reduce reliance on the United States and build alternative trade relationships. This leads to a broader point. Very few countries are in a position to decline major trade demands from the United States without immediate consequences. Canada has reached a position where it can take that stance, largely due to a consistent long-term strategy. One of the first major steps in that strategy was strengthening trade relations with the European Union through the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. While this agreement had already existed, it was used more actively with efforts made to simplify processes and expand access. As a result, Canadian exports to the European Union increased significantly, showing a shift in trade direction. At the same time, Canada expanded its involvement with key Asian markets such as Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Vietnam through participation in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. This provided Canadian exporters with broader access to fast-growing economies and reduced dependence on a single trading partner. Energy partnerships also became a major focus. Agreements with countries like Germany created long-term demand for Canadian energy exports, including liquefied natural gas and other resources. These deals provided alternative markets outside of the United States. Earlier tariff actions also demonstrated how this strategy works in practice. When tariffs were placed on Canadian steel and aluminum, Canada responded with targeted measures affecting specific American goods. At the same time, Canadian producers redirected exports to other regions, reducing the overall impact and maintaining stability. This brings us to the current situation. The same set of demands has been presented again, and once again, they have been rejected. This leaves limited options moving forward. If the United States were to move toward withdrawing from the USMCA, there is a formal process that requires advance notice. During that time, businesses would begin adjusting operations in response to uncertainty. One of the first areas affected would be manufacturing. Many industries rely on cross-border supply chains, and any disruption would increase production costs. Companies would need to adapt, which could lead to higher prices or operational changes. Energy markets would also be impacted. Canada is a major supplier of oil to the United States, and any shift in supply could influence pricing and availability. Adjustments in this area would take time due to infrastructure requirements. Agriculture would be another area affected. Canada is a major export market for American agricultural products, and changes in trade conditions could disrupt that relationship. Financial markets could also react to uncertainty in trade agreements, as stability and predictability are key factors in long-term planning. In a recent speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Carney spoke about changes in the global economic environment and emphasized the importance of diversification and reliable partnerships. His remarks reflected a broader shift in how countries are approaching international trade. Energy remains a central factor. The United States imports a large volume of oil from Canada, and existing systems are designed around that supply. Changing those systems would require time and investment. In addition, Canada exports electricity to several northern U.S. states, supporting energy needs in those regions. Any disruption could affect costs and supply stability. One specific issue that has drawn attention is dairy trade. While it represents a relatively small portion of the overall economic relationship, it carries significant domestic importance in Canada, making policy changes complex. Taken together, these elements show that the situation is not limited to one issue, but involves multiple interconnected factors. The outcome will depend on how both sides choose to move forward. And for now, the situation remains uncertain as developments continue.